All signs point to this, folks, and it has never been more crystal clear. The writing is officially on the wall. The fat lady is warming up her vocal cords, and the Toronto Blue Jays are preparing to say goodbye to one of the most beloved players in franchise history. We're talking about Bo Bichette, ladies and gentlemen. And based on the avalanche of reports that have dropped over the past 24 hours, his time in a Blue Jays uniform appears to be coming to an end. This isn't speculation anymore. This isn't reading tea leaves or interpreting vague comments from general managers. This is multiple respected insiders all saying the same thing independently. Bo Bichette returning to Toronto is becoming increasingly unlikely with each passing day. And while all eyes remain fixated on Kyle Tucker and the Blue Jays' aggressive pursuit of the star outfielder, the Bo Bichette situation has been quietly evolving in the background. And the picture that's emerging is one that's going to break a lot of hearts in Blue Jays Nation. But here's the thing, if losing Bo means landing Kyle Tucker, are the Blue Jays actually making the right move? Is this addition by subtraction? Or are they about to make a catastrophic mistake by letting a homegrown superstar walk away to a division rival? We're going to dig deep into all the new reports, analyze what they mean for Toronto's future, discuss the massive implications for the American League East, and try to make sense of how we got to this point where one of the franchise's cornerstone players is about to become a free agent pickup for someone else. Plus, we've got some fascinating developments involving the Chicago Cubs making a massive trade that has huge ramifications for the Blue Jays and the entire AL East. The Yankees were aggressively pursuing the same player and got completely shut out, which opens up some very interesting possibilities for how the rest of this offseason plays out. And of course, we'll talk about Kyle Tucker, because his situation and Bo's situation are now completely intertwined in ways that will determine the trajectory of this franchise for the next decade. But first, let's talk about the reports that have baseball insiders convinced Bo Bichette has played his last game in a Toronto Blue Jays uniform. This all started picking up serious momentum yesterday with a report from Mitch Bannon that I initially covered focusing on the Blue Jays' increased efforts to recruit Kyle Tucker. But buried in that same report was a line that should have set off alarm bells for anyone who wants to see Bo back in Toronto. After getting Kazuma, a reunion with Bichette appears increasingly unlikely now. One report from one insider isn't necessarily cause for panic. Reporters speculate, situations change, and increasingly unlikely doesn't mean impossible. But then the floodgates opened, and suddenly we had multiple highly respected insiders all saying essentially the same thing. This wasn't coordinated messaging, these were independent evaluations from people with different sources, all reaching the same conclusion. Ken Rosenthal, one of the most plugged-in reporters in all of baseball, weighed in with his own assessment. Rosenthal noted that Ernie Clement would only be squeezed for playing time if the Blue Jays re-signed Bo Bichette, which Rosenthal also believes is increasingly unlikely. There's that phrase again, increasingly unlikely. When you have both Mitch Bannon and Ken Rosenthal independently using the same language to describe Bo's chances of returning, that's not a coincidence. That's multiple sources telling these reporters the same information. But wait, there's more. Bob Nightingale, another veteran insider with deep connections throughout baseball, added his voice to the chorus. Nightingale reported that while the Blue Jays still have the door wide open for Bichette to return, considering they couldn't sign an extension and have gotten nowhere in 2 months of negotiations, a reunion appears more unlikely by the day. Notice the pattern. Every single one of these insiders is using variations of the same theme: unlikely, increasingly unlikely, more unlikely by the day. When you see this kind of consensus developing among reporters who don't typically coordinate their coverage, it means something real is happening behind the scenes. This isn't speculation or hot takes designed to generate clicks. This is legitimate reporting from people who are hearing from sources inside the Blue Jays organization, Bo's camp, and around the league that this relationship is heading toward an ending rather than a new beginning. Ben Nicholson-Smith, who covers the Blue Jays more closely than perhaps any other reporter, added some important context to all of this. He noted that if the Blue Jays still want to add a prominent position player, and we all know that means Kyle Tucker, it would require trading someone like Nathan Luxus, Davis Schneider, or potentially even Ernie Clement. Most people believe Luxus is the most likely to be moved, but nothing is set in stone at this point. The Kazuma Okamoto signing appears to have been the catalyst that changed the Blue Jays' entire approach to this offseason. Before Okamoto, there was at least a possibility that Toronto could pursue both Bo and Kyle Tucker, finding creative ways to fit both players onto the roster while managing the playing time distribution. But once Okamoto signed his 4-year $60 million deal and was designated as the everyday third baseman, the calculus shifted dramatically. Suddenly, bringing back Bo became significantly more complicated from a roster construction standpoint. If Okamoto is playing third base every day, and you bring Bo back to play second base, assuming he's even willing to do that full-time, then where does that leave Ernie Clement? What happens to Addison Barger's development? How do you keep everyone happy and productive when there simply aren't enough positions to go around? The Kyle Tucker fit, by contrast, is seamless. Tucker is a left-handed hitting outfielder who slots perfectly into left field, gives you elite defense, provides consistent power and average, and doesn't create any of the positional logjams that bringing back Bo would create. If you land Tucker, you trade Nathan Lugsius or Davis Schneider for pitching helper prospects. And suddenly, your roster makes perfect sense with no awkward fits or unhappy players sitting on the bench. This is where we need to talk honestly about the differences between Bo Bichette and Kyle Tucker as players and as long-term investments for the franchise. Both are excellent players who would make any team better. Both are in their prime years with plenty of productive baseball ahead of them, but they're not equivalent pieces, and pretending otherwise does a disservice to the analysis. Kyle Tucker is the better all-around player right now, and it's not particularly close when you evaluate every aspect of their games. Tucker provides elite defense in the outfield, while Bo is a significant liability at shortstop and would be moving to second base, where his defensive value drops even further. Tucker has stayed healthier throughout his career, while Bo has battled multiple injuries that have cost him significant playing time. Tucker hits from the left side, which is more valuable in the current baseball landscape, while Bo hits right-handed. Beyond the on-field production, there's also the question of what these players represent for the franchise moving forward. George Springer is approaching the final year of his deal. Dalton Varsho will hit free agency after next season. As Springer ages out and potentially moves on, the Blue Jays need someone to be the face of the franchise in the outfield for the next decade. Kyle Tucker could be that guy. He'd sign a mega contract, pair with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. as the two pillars of the organization, and give Toronto a legitimate superstar in his prime for years to come. With Bo, you can make similar arguments about him being a franchise cornerstone, but it's more complicated. His defensive limitations mean he's not playing a premium position anymore. His injury history creates questions about long-term durability, and the financial commitment required to keep him would be substantial for a player who doesn't profile as a generational talent the way Tucker does. This isn't about disrespecting Bo Bichette or diminishing what he's meant to this organization. He's been absolutely phenomenal during his time in Toronto. He's given fans countless memorable moments. He's been the face of the franchise alongside Vladdy for years. But when you're a front office trying to maximize your championship window, you have to make difficult decisions based on cold, hard analysis rather than sentiment and emotional attachment. The Blue Jays appear to have made that difficult decision, and they've chosen Kyle Tucker over Bo Bichette. Based on everything we're hearing from multiple independent sources, that's the direction this is heading. Tucker is the priority. Tucker is the target. Tucker is the player they're going all in to acquire. And if that means Bo walks away in free agency and signs with another team, that's a cost the Blue Jays are willing to pay now. There are some potential scenarios where Bo could still return to Toronto, but they're becoming increasingly far-fetched with each passing day. Ben Nicholson-Smith outlined a couple of possibilities that would make a reunion feasible, but both seem unlikely at this point. The first scenario involves Bo taking a shorter deal with opt-outs, similar to what Alex Bregman did last year. Bregman signed a 3-year contract with opt-outs after each season, allowing him to test free agency again if the market improved or his performance warranted a bigger payday. If Bo were willing to do something similar, maybe a 2- or 3-year deal with early opt-outs, the Blue Jays could potentially make the money work and figure out the playing time distribution. But here's the problem with that scenario. Why would Bo accept a short-term deal when he's looking for long-term security? He's in his prime years, he just came off a strong season, and he wants to maximize his earning potential while he's still young and productive. Taking a prove-it deal with opt-outs doesn't align with his goals unless the market completely collapses and he has no other options. The second scenario is even more complicated. The Blue Jays would have to make a significant trade, potentially moving Anthony Santander with 4 years remaining on his deal. To open up both roster space and financial flexibility for Bo, this seems wildly unlikely for multiple reasons. First, Santander just signed with Toronto last offseason and had a terrible year plagued by injuries. His trade value is probably at an all-time low right now. Second, even if you could find a trading partner willing to take on Santander's contract, you'd likely have to attach prospects or eat significant money to make it work. Third, why would the Blue Jays go through all that trouble just to bring back Bo, when they could simply pursue Tucker and avoid all the complexity? So while yes, technically there are pathways for Bo to return to Toronto, they all require unlikely circumstances to align perfectly. The much more probable outcome is that the Blue Jays land Kyle Tucker. Bo signs elsewhere, possibly with a division rival like the Yankees or Red Sox, and Toronto moves forward with a new-look roster that's built around Tucker, Vladdy, and the other pieces they've assembled. Let's talk about what that means emotionally for Blue Jays fans. Because this isn't just about roster construction and financial analysis. Bo Bichette has been the heart and soul of this team for years. He's a homegrown player who came up through the organization, established himself as a star, and became one of the most popular players in franchise history. The connection between Bo and the fan base runs deep, built on years of thrilling performances and the promise of championships to come, and now, after the Blue Jays made it all the way to Game 7 of the World Series, after Bo hit that absolutely majestic 3-run homer off Shohei Ohtani, that would have been the defining moment of an entire generation if Toronto had completed the comeback. We're looking at a scenario where his last game as a Blue Jay might be that devastating Game 7 loss. Think about that for a second. If Bo really has played his final game in a Toronto uniform, his last memory as a Blue Jay will be hitting one of the biggest home runs in franchise history in a losing effort. That 3-run shot off Ohtani was the kind of moment that creates legends. For fans who weren't alive for Joe Carter's walk-off homer in the 1993 World Series, Bo's blast would have been their defining championship memory if the Blue Jays had held on and won, but they didn't win. The Dodgers came back. Game 7 slipped away. And now Bo might be walking away, leaving behind what could have been and taking his talents to another organization. That's brutal to contemplate. Especially for fans who've invested emotionally in Bo's journey and desperately want to see him retire as a Blue Jay. The unfortunate reality is that professional sports is a business, and business decisions often hurt. Players who seem like they should be lifers end up wearing different uniforms. Franchise icons move on because the money doesn't work or the roster fit isn't right. And sometimes, organizations have to make calculated choices about which players to invest in and which ones to let walk away. The Blue Jays appear to have made their choice. They're choosing Kyle Tucker's elite all-around game over Bo Bichette's offensive excellence. They're prioritizing a seamless roster fit over the emotional connection to a homegrown star. They're betting that Tucker represents a better long-term investment than Bo, both on the field and financially. Are they right? Time will tell. Maybe Tucker signs with Toronto, becomes everything they hope he'll be, and leads them to multiple championships over the next decade. Or maybe Bo goes elsewhere, stays healthy, continues producing at an elite level, and makes the Blue Jays regret letting him get away. We won't know for years how this decision plays out. But based on everything we're hearing right now, the decision has been made. Now, let's shift gears and talk about something that happened yesterday that has massive implications for the Blue Jays and the entire American League East. The Chicago Cubs acquired Edward Cabrera from the Miami Marlins in exchange for a package headlined by Owen Casey, their #1 prospect, along with Christian Hernandez and Edgardo de Leon on the surface. This seems like a National League transaction that has nothing to do with Toronto. But here's why it matters tremendously. The New York Yankees were aggressively pursuing Edward Cabrera as recently as 2 days ago. Multiple reports indicated they were going hard after the young right-handed pitcher, hoping to add another arm to their rotation. And they got completely shut out when the Cubs swooped in and made a deal. The Yankees, for all their financial resources and historical prestige, aren't doing anything this offseason. They've been connected to various players, they've had discussions with free agents, but they haven't landed any of the big fish they've been pursuing. Cody Bellinger is still available and the Yankees have been linked to him, but nothing is materialized yet. Meanwhile, their division rivals in Toronto are loading up with Dylan Cease, Shane Bieber, Kazuma Okamoto, and potentially Kyle Tucker. This is fantastic news for the Blue Jays. The entire AL East landscape is remarkably quiet right now outside of Toronto's aggressive moves. The Orioles made the Pete Alonso signing, which is significant, but beyond that, there haven't been any arms race developments among the division rivals. The Red Sox are still figuring out their situation with Alex Bregman and potentially others. The Rays are the Rays operating on a limited budget as always. The Yankees are striking out on their targets and sitting idle. This creates a golden opportunity for Toronto to separate themselves from the pack. If they can land Kyle Tucker, they'll have made a statement to the entire division that they're not playing around anymore. They're going all in on their championship window, and they're willing to outspend and outmaneuver everyone else to build a roster capable of winning it all. Imagine being a Yankees fan right now. Watching your division rivals in Toronto add ace after ace to the rotation, sign a productive Japanese third baseman, and potentially land one of the best outfielders in baseball while your team does absolutely nothing. That's gotta be infuriating. And for Blue Jays fans, it should be incredibly encouraging because it means the path to the division title is clearer than it's been in years. The Cubs acquiring Cabrera and keeping him away from the Yankees is just another example of how other teams' moves can have ripple effects throughout baseball. New York wanted that pitcher, they couldn't get him, and now they're scrambling to find alternative ways to improve their roster. Meanwhile, Toronto is methodically checking off boxes and building exactly the kind of roster they envisioned when this offseason began. So where does all of this leave us? As we look ahead to the next few days and weeks, the Bo Bichette situation appears to be heading toward an ending. Multiple respected insiders are all saying the same thing. A reunion with Toronto is increasingly unlikely. The Blue Jays have made Kyle Tucker their top priority, and if landing Tucker means losing Bo, they're comfortable with that trade-off for fans who've loved watching Bo develop into a star, who've cherished his connection with Vladdy, who've dreamed of seeing him retire as a Blue Jay. This is heartbreaking news. But for fans who want to see the Blue Jays build the best possible roster and maximize their championship odds, pivoting to Tucker makes all the sense in the world. The emotional attachment to Bo is real and valid. He's earned the love and respect of Blue Jays fans through years of excellent performance and memorable moments. But the front office has to make decisions based on what gives them the best chance to win championships, not on what feels good emotionally. And right now, every indication suggests they believe Kyle Tucker gives them a better chance than Bo Bichette. If Bo does leave, where does he end up? The Yankees make sense as a landing spot if they can't land Cody Bellinger. The Red Sox have been heavily connected to him throughout the process. The Dodgers were mentioned earlier in the offseason. Any number of teams could jump into the mix if his asking price comes down to a more reasonable level. The nightmare scenario for Blue Jays fans would be Bo signing with the Yankees or Red Sox and terrorizing his former team for the next decade. Imagine watching him rake against Toronto's pitching 4 or 5 times a year, hitting clutch home runs that knock the Blue Jays out of playoff position and becoming a beloved star for a division rival. That would be absolutely brutal too. Endure. But that's the risk Toronto is taking by prioritizing Tucker over Bo. They're betting that Tucker's superior all-around game and better positional fit will outweigh any damage Bo might do as a member of another team. It's a calculated gamble, and we won't know for years whether it pays off or blows up in their faces. One thing is certain, the Kazuma Okamoto signing changed everything. Before Okamoto, there was at least a theoretical path to keeping Bo and adding Tucker. After Okamoto, that path disappeared and the Blue Jays had to choose. Based on every report we're seeing, they've chosen Tucker. So Blue Jays fans, I want to hear from you in the comments. How do you feel about the possibility, the increasing likelihood, that Bo Bichette has played his last game in a Toronto uniform? Are you devastated to see him go? Or do you understand the business decision and support pivoting to Kyle Tucker? If that 3-run homer off Ohtani in Game 7 ends up being his last moment as a Blue Jay, how will you remember his time with the organization? And what about that Cubs trade for Edward Cabrera? Are you as excited as I am that the Yankees struck out and didn't improve their roster while Toronto continues to load up? Do you think the Blue Jays have a clear path to dominating the AL East if they land Tucker? Drop your thoughts in the comments below because I want to hear from all of you. This is one of the most significant off-season developments we've seen, and it deserves a robust discussion from everyone. Who cares about the future of this franchise? If you enjoyed this breakdown of the Bo Bichette situation and all the latest reports indicating he's played his last game in Toronto, smash that like button and help us spread this news to other Blue Jays fans who need to know what's happening. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because we're covering every development in real time as this story continues to unfold. Hit that notification bell so you're alerted the moment we drop new videos with the latest updates. Share this with your fellow Blue Jays fans who've been wondering about Bo's future. Comment below with your predictions for where he eventually signs and whether you think the Blue Jays are making the right call by prioritizing Tucker. And make sure you stick with us because this offseason is far from over and we've got so much more coming your way. The writing is on the wall, folks. Multiple insiders are telling us the same story. Bo Bichette's time in Toronto appears to be coming to an end. Kyle Tucker is the priority. The Blue Jays are going all-in on building a championship roster. And if that means saying goodbye to one of the most beloved players in franchise history, they're willing to make that painful choice. It's been an incredible run watching Bo develop from a prospect into a star. That 3-run homer off Shohei Ohtani will live in Blue Jays lore forever, regardless of whether Bo plays another game in a Toronto uniform. But all good things must come to an end, and it appears we're rapidly approaching that ending. Thank you guys for watching. You've been absolute beasts with your support, and we couldn't do this without you. We'll be back with more updates as this situation continues to develop. Until next time, this is Jays or Nothing, reminding you that change is hard but necessary when you're chasing